play a game.
Me too, Billy, me too. We're going to be ranking the movies, tier ranking style. Let's get into it. Hello everyone, it's now finally time to rank all the Saw movies, doing it tier ranking style from A to F, and there's been a mixed bag when it comes to movies from the top all the way down to the bottom. So I want to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Where would you rank them? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Again, these are just my opinions, my thoughts. Love to hear yours down in the comment section below. And if you are new to the channel, I've done tier ranking videos in the past. We've ranked Indiana Jones movies, we've ranked DC, Marvel, along with others. So if you do like those type of content, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button. But without further ado, I'll show you the screen and we'll get started here. So as you can see in the screen here, so we've got Saw 1 all the way up until SawX, the most recent one, and we're going to start ranking them. So I'll put timestamps in the description down below for each movie. So if there's any movie in particular you want to know my thoughts about or where they would rank, the timestamps will be in the description down below. But we're going to start off with the very first one, the one that kicked off the whole franchise. And I'll say this right now, my personal favorite, it's going to be Saw 1. In my review I mentioned about how it's mostly dialogue and you've just got a lot of things going on when it comes to like the characters outside of like the room. You've got things going on when it comes to like the characters inside the room. But what you really get is you see a little bit of like the Jigsaw, the serial killer, what he's up to. You get to see the characters, Adam and Dr. Gordon, and how they're trying to first work together, then working against each other. Now, there is a little bit of a nitpick when it comes to some parts of the movie in itself, but that third act really is so strong and so solid. And of course, you've got the twist with Tobin Bell just standing up in front of Adam and just really came about so well. Like that for me just has not been replicated yet. But I love that twist. I love watching that scene. I love watching the third act. And you just get a lot of great things when it comes to in terms of even the pacing of the movie, how they're explaining these characters, why they got here, how they got here, and their relationship between the two of them is just really well handled. So yeah, when it comes to Saw, the very first one, like I said, my favorite one in the whole franchise, this one for me is going as a straight A. Really solid movie, and honestly it still holds up today. Okay, so the next one in the franchise is we've got Saw 2, where we get the introduction to Eric Matthews and we see him and Jigsaw having that confrontation. You get that famous sequence of just Eric Matthews beating the shit off Jigsaw, and I really shouldn't laugh, but it was just so funny just seeing John Kramer just get punched and beaten up so badly. Oh, I'm sorry, Tobin Bell, I'm sorry. But again, with this one, it's such a great follow-up. So with this, it sort of started the trend of like having these focus on the detectives, while in the next part of the movie you've got these games are being played. But what I really like with this one, and I feel like what has really lost focus in the upcoming movies, is that these traps, you have a way of escaping these traps. You have a way where your mindset, your ideas, your strength or weaknesses or whatever it is for you to be able to escape. That's not the case when some of the other movies, like your fate is in somebody else's hand, whereas this one everybody's like roaming around and like it's just this free-for-all. Everybody's in this house full of death traps and everybody's just going one by one trying to figure out how to escape. So you've got that side of things there with the return of Amanda, where she briefly appeared in the first movie, which you didn't think was like going to be a big character, but then she's come back again and she's this really great character. So you've got that going on. Even like the dialogue with Eric Matthews and John Kramer back and forth was really just well done. So similar to like the first movie, you got that dialogue side of the movie and it just works really well. But then that third act with the intercutting with like the police raiding the wrong house to Eric Matthews and John Kramer going into the right house, but it's a couple of days later we come to find out flashbacks of Amanda and the detective's son, Eric Matthews' son, going around trying to get away from the crazy guy who's trying to get people's numbers from the back of their neck after everybody else has been killed. So just again, like that third act is just going really well with every single part of the movie, blending all together. And then even like that twist reveal, again, it's not going to be as great as the first twist reveal, but just having to find out that like the events that these police officers and Detective Matthews was watching from his son's point of view wasn't live and took place in the past. Mind-blowing twist with then coming to find out that the son was actually in a safe right next to Eric Matthews in John Kramer's hideout the whole time, was just a chef's kiss for me. So I really like this one. So when it comes to Saw 2, this one, a solid sequel, going as like a B for me here. So for the next one we've got here is sort of like the end of the trilogy, the end of the first 3 movies for especially John Kramer. We're coming to Saw 3. Now with this one, honestly, it's not as strong as like the first 2, given the fact that, again, starting that trend of like now it's like somebody we're following going through these traps. And in terms of like the traps itself, I love like the traps. You've got like the woman getting frozen to death. You've got the judge who's getting like soaked by dead pigs, and then the one with like the arms and legs twisting, just gruesome stuff. But you kind of felt like this was a bit harsh when it comes to Jigsaw. Like, this man lost his son and now you're putting him through all of this where these people are just getting tortured for the sake of it. That's where you really feel like, man, Jigsaw is one fucked up guy. But in terms of like the movie itself, what I really enjoyed was, again, like the John Kramer aspect of it, where you come to find out that he is leaving the fate of Dr. Lin in his hands, where if his heart rate flatlines, her face is going to end up getting shot up by the mechanism that's around her neck. You get this elaborate performance with Amanda. So the movie in itself, while entertaining, again, not as strong as like the first 2 movies, I still had a great time with it. And then even like the third act too, when just everything turns into a shit show, like Jeff manages to like escape from every single trap. We revealed that Amanda's the one that was being tested the whole time. She ends up shooting Dr. Lin, who was actually Jeff's wife. He ends up shooting Amanda, killing her. John Kramer ends up being dead because of Jeff. So this whole shit show of things going around. And then even like to play devil's advocate too, that John Kramer's so twisted in his mind that he ends up making Jeff play another game because his daughter is somewhere trapped in like a box somewhere. So just Jeff cannot catch a break. But the movie overall was just a really fun ride, a great entertainment, a great joy from Saw. But again, not as strong as like the previous 2 movies. There are some flaws when it comes to it. Like I said, the whole logic with Jeff's being tested because he lost his son and like the rage and all that kind of stuff that he's going through. The weaker aspects with like John dying and the brain surgery and all that kind of stuff. So there was some little bits of flaws when it comes to that. But for Saw 3, this one, I'm going to have to put it as a C. Again, out of the 3, the weakest on there, but definitely not the worst in the franchise whatsoever. Okay, so next up on the list is we've got Saw 4. Now for me, it's really one of the weakest in the franchise because the pacing of the movie and like the detective we're following. So pretty much the first couple of scenes in the movie is where it's really at its goriest. They kill off Detective Kerry, who was in a couple of movies there. You've got Eric Matthews dying at the end of the movie. You're following Detective Rigg, who is just doing this exploration of trying to find himself, trying to make sure that people, the victims of this old Jigsaw trap, are being tested and have to have their fate in their own hands. And even like the whole Saw games of it, you've got one person with her hair being pulled, another person who's like this creepy motel owner. So it just really wasn't that interesting when it comes to like the movie itself. Like, it was very boring, it was very bland. You weren't really interested in like the detective side of things there. And then when it's like cutting through like the opening sequence with you've got the blind man versus the mute man, having to try and figure out what they're going to do with that. I like that opening trap. I thought it was very creative, but the rest of the movie I just felt like was very bland and just wasn't enjoyable for me. It's not one that I'll definitely go and rewatch over and over again because you're just not following that interesting story point. And then even when we get to the third act, because you get introduced to Detective Strom, who's now towards the third act trying to figure out who's behind all of this, we come to find out that his timeline is in the same timeline as Saw 3, so that's all interconnecting. He ends up shooting Jeff, killing Jeff, so we find out what happens to Jeff. He dies because of Strom. The door ends up closing, so he's trapped in this whole room from the events of Saw 3. And then we find out that Hoffman is another apprentice of Jigsaw. So you've now got Amanda and Jigsaw, and that's when the franchise really starts getting convoluted with everything going on. So for this one, definitely a weak point in the franchise. So when it comes to Saw 4, this one for me is going to go as an E. Really just not a movie that can hold up well over the course of like the rest of the franchise. So yeah, it's definitely going as an E for me here. So the next one is Saw 5. Now with this one, it's following the whole cat and mouse game with Strom and Hoffman. Like, you're coming to find out more in terms of like Hoffman and his backstory, how he got recruited, and like how he was helping Jigsaw in the traps from the previous movie. Strom did this really great way of escaping from like the first trap that he was in. After like escaping from the room, he ends up in this room with a jar of water filled in his head. He ends up poking himself with a pen to get airwaves coming out. And so you're focusing on this, but while the other aspect is one of like the most blandest Saw games, like it really did feel like an escape room with the logic just being honestly thrown out the window. So you come to find out that these 5 people were behind this fire thing that happened and killing off 8 people, I believe it was. And so every room is like they're having to work together, but they end up being selfish and go through killing each other off one by one. Again, logic behind it, especially like the tunnel one where you know that the tunnel was big enough to fit 2 people, but you just didn't use logic. So this whole escape roomism, when it comes to this, just didn't really work for me. And then the whole cat and mouse game, like, just it was a lot more interesting than Riggs' storyline, I'll be completely honest, but still it was another like low entry to the point. Like, you've got a really solid 3 movies and then the back-to-back bland detective storyline when it comes to Saw 5. So again, not one that I would definitely go rewatching. I really liked Strom in this movie, but then again, the ending of the movie when you've got Hoffman and Strom fighting, going back and forth with one another, which I would have wanted a more longer scene with it, just going hand-to-hand combat, but that was briefly done, and then Hoffman ends up tricking him, putting himself in like this big casing where Strom ends up getting squished to death. So that was like a nice quick ending, a nice quick third act, but the rest of the movie just wasn't holding up enough. So yeah, when it comes to Saw 5, while it definitely was weak, not as weak as Saw 4, so definitely a little bit above it, so going as an E, but better than Saw 4 for me. So for the next one we've got here is Saw 6. This one was definitely a lot of an improvement versus Saw 4 and Saw 5. Hoffman, I really liked his scenes in there, especially the part where they were descrambling the voice and him stabbing Erickson, him throwing coffee at Perez's face, using the descrambler agent to like be the body for like the shots being fired at him. So he just really stood out as a character in this movie, really coming into his own. And then the whole aspect when it comes to like the Saw traps, you've got great weight to it because the person that's being tested is the one that actually denied John Kramer his claim when it comes to like insurance and health policy and that kind of stuff. My only little criticism, like I mentioned in my review, is that the Saw traps weren't as like engaging or interesting. Like, you've got the first trap of one person has to hold their breath, the other person isn't able to do it, so his lungs get punctured, him holding the ropes, saving one or the other, him leading somebody through like a room of steam and stuff like that. The only really like standout one was that carousel one, which really the actors and actresses just made that scene work for me. As entertaining as it was, it's one of the better like Saw games in like the later part of the movie. For me, the big standout was like Hoffman in this movie and like focusing on him and his situation going on there. Even like the whole aspect of like him escaping the bear trap because Jill puts him in there. I think that just really worked well, just really emphasizing how great of a character Hoffman was eventually, especially in this movie. So when it comes to Saw 6, this one definitely improvement over Saw 4 and Saw 5. So this one going as a C for me here. Okay, now for the next one, Saw 3D, Saw the final chapter, Saw 7. This one is definitely the weakest of the whole franchise. The only good thing about this is you got Hoffman playing this little Terminator, stabbing people in the throat towards the very third act, and then also having John Kramer being de-aged with that backwards hat. One of the best scenes in the whole franchise, I have to say. But overall, the movie itself just did not work. This was supposed to be a finale, but then you've got this character being tested because he faked being played by Jigsaw. You've got the whole opening kill with like the love triangle, which really, if you think about it, just why does Jigsaw even care if a girl is using 2 guys? Everything just felt convoluted with the whole third act. Then you've got Hoffman going after Jill. You've got this detective that nobody is interested in, and like having this backstory just really bland. And then the third act, the big reveal of like Dr. Gordon from the very first movie is now a detective, which everybody kind of saw it coming. You're revealing him in the opening scene of the movie and then revealing him there, but it's just like another apprentice being involved in it, and just left a lot of questions unanswered, like the 2 pigs that was with Dr. Gordon, who were they, and just everything, just a lot of things just being left unanswered and just really didn't work that well. So I definitely think this is one of the weakest in the franchise. Is it one that you can go back and rewatch? Probably. It's got some interesting elements, but like I said, Hoffman was, after going from like a great movie in Saw 6 with him and like really standing out to being put on the back burner and him just making videos and sending it to the police officers. Again, that, like I said, that police officer Gibson just not as interesting as like the previous detectives like Strom, for example. So one that's really weak in the franchise. So definitely for me, going as an F. Probably one of the worst movies in the franchise. Okay, so for the next one, we've got Jigsaw, which is sort of like a, I guess you can call it like a soft reboot, because this isn't really Saw 8, not like a continuation. We come to find out that like the big puzzle of it all was that Tobin Bell is coming back. How are they going to bring him back? Coming to find out that it's all a flashback sequence. Everything taking place 10 years later. So again, you're focusing on the detectives while having a Saw game being played. Now, say what you want about the movie. It may not be a great movie, but in terms of like the Saw games, I found it really enjoyable. May not be memorable as like the other Saw traps, but it was still really enjoyable. Like for me, when it comes to the whole detective storyline, I didn't really find that interesting. Again, with one of the person that's behind all of this is one of the coroners who was part of the flashback games from 10 years ago. He's now an apprentice, or like another apprentice of Jigsaw. Like this guy hires more people than any other job that I know. Like the characters were memorable for me. They stood out. They were entertaining, especially Ryan in the movie. Like him and Mitch and Anna, like the three remaining ones, were pretty entertaining. The games, the bucket head, the silo, even like that big contraption when like Mitch has to go inside and like get the brake pedal thingy. I think that's still memorable and still enjoyable. And then like even the last one where John Kramer is there, again like a flashback. We come to find out that the keys was inside the shell. Anna ends up shooting or trying to shoot Ryan, ends up getting shot in the face because the gun was backwards. So it's, for me, it was enjoyable when it comes to that aspect, but nowhere near as good as like the original like couple of movies of Saw. It got that like higher budget feel to it, but it just didn't work well when it comes to like keeping you engaged with like the storyline. But I still find it a lot more entertaining, especially when it comes to coroners. Like you've got Logan in there, you've got Eleanor in there. Eleanor's like a big fan of Saw. She's even like building the traps, all that kind of stuff. So that kind of was like a little bit of a good element, and also trying to figure out how is Jigsaw returning. So that kind of keeps you on your toes. So when it comes to Jigsaw, for me, this one is going as like a D, because if I'm comparing it to like 4, 5, and 6, those sort of elements just weren't as great. Some of the traps may have been a lot more memorable, but I still just find it a bit bland when it comes to like the storytelling there. So yeah, Jigsaw's going as a D. Okay, now for the next movie, we've got Spiral, the Book of Saw. Like I mentioned it in my review, this really didn't feel like a Saw movie. I just felt like a lot of things was done to try and make it look like a Saw movie, but really wasn't. It felt like a murder mystery detective story, similar to like a movie called Mystic River. I mentioned it in my review. Billy the Puppet and Jigsaw itself should have just been left entirely out of the movie. I liked Chris Rock's performance, but the third act, the whole twist, just wasn't really as shocking to me as it could have been. I felt like a lot of things needed work when it comes to this. So a movie that did leave me disappointed, because I don't know if this was a reboot, I don't know if this was a spin-off, I'm honestly not sure what it was. Even the Saw traps, I did enjoy the one with like Angie and like the wax coming down on her face. The first trap was a bit entertaining, and it may come as a surprise after my review of Spiral, but like really just coming to like think about it and reviewing it for the previous other movies, I find it watchable, but it's not a Saw movie for me whatsoever. Even like the characters too, it's like your real focus is Chris Rock character, and the other characters just not really more focused, or like didn't really get like enough screen time or screen presence in it. So it's still just a movie that I probably won't watch. If they do a sequel, I might rewatch it for the sequel, but I don't think we'll be getting a sequel when it comes to this. For me, when it comes to Spiral, then this one is going as an E as well. It's definitely better than Saw 4, but not as strong as it could have been when comparing it to Saw 5. So yeah, this one's going as like an E for me. Okay, now for the final movie of the franchise here so far, we've got SawX. This one, I'm going to put this on right now. It's going as like an A. This one for me is the second best movie of the franchise. Going back to the basics, having John Kramer as like a more vulnerable state. So traps, the gore, the gruesomeness. Again, like I said, brought it back to basics. I really enjoyed like the storyline that we were telling with this. You got to see John Kramer front and center, and his performance, Tobin Bell, absolutely nailed it in this movie. You really enjoyed like what they were doing pacing wise. You're spending the first 30-40 minutes with John Kramer in that vulnerable state, like I mentioned, going through the whole therapy operation, that kind of stuff. And then when it kicks in, it kicks into high gear. You get that focus with like Amanda returning and that relationship between John and Amanda. Like it really felt well written and well like documented. And then the traps too, like I love the traps. We got back to like the winnable traps, the John Kramer traps, where like everybody gets a chance to live. And then the third act too, while it may not have been as shocking as like Saw 1 or even possibly Saw 2, I didn't see it coming for me. Like the twist really caught me off guard, and I just enjoyed the whole third act aspect of it there. Like you see John Kramer in a vulnerable state, but then you get that John Kramer, that Jigsaw John Kramer. So I had such a fun time with this movie. So it's definitely going as an A, hands down second favorite movie of the whole franchise. But that about wraps it up for the tier ranking here. So these are my thoughts on all the movies from Saw 1 all the way up until Saw 10. So I want to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Where would you rank it? What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? I want to know all of that in the comment section down below. And again, if you do like these tier ranking videos, definitely consider subscribing. We've got plenty more tier rankings coming up in the future. So definitely subscribe to the channel so you're not missing out on that. And also don't forget, I have got a Twitter, link is in the description down below. You can go ahead and follow me on that. And if you're interested in my thoughts on all the movies, reviews on the channel, playlist around here, you can check that out. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This is YK Reviews. Peace.